Hello and welcome to another edition of the News Review program. I am Fatou Kamara and you're watching us live from the Fatou Network studios along the Caraba Avenue. It was great show yesterday. Thank you very much to Os Mbenga. We really appreciate your time, you joining us all the way from Washington, D.C. And we tried to have Amadou Skatare Jane, Dr. Jane on the line today, but until now we didn't get an email back from him yet. But between now and 4 o'clock, if we do, we'll try to slot him in. And also the NYSS director, executive director, is to give us an interview, but we've moved that interview to Monday. He will join us on Monday to talk about what really happened. We know that the Ministry of Youth and Sports did write a letter to the NYSS requesting for $1 million to help the minister's trip to Azerbaijan so they can pay for his per diem. And that has become an issue. Everyone is asking why $1 million for per diem. We will definitely try to talk to them and we will get this all cleared up for you. We've also tried to reach to the Ministry of Finance so they can tell us if this per diem is really, really necessary, especially if they're traveling outside of Europe. For instance, if they're going to Senegal, some are saying instead of giving them £300 a night, why don't they cut it down because the hotels will be cheaper around there. So that and a lot more coming up next week. We would look into those. But the newspapers first, the standard newspapers, is Jammeh invited to give evidence at commission. I was sitting right here thinking, do you think he will come over and give evidence? Well, actually, I don't know, but I saw Sana giving evidence via Skype. So you never know, maybe we'll have Jammeh online from Equatorial Guinea via Skype as well, you know. With technology now, you never know, so let's keep our fingers crossed. And Gambians shot dead in the U.S. Very, very sad story. I understand the person, Mr. Jallo, was ADC to Vice President, the former Vice President, Dr. Aissatou Njie Saidi. Human Rights Watch, of course, the dictator hunter, is really happy that Ghana welcomes the decision, and they're also welcoming the decision to 6 German extradition to Ghana. Hopefully, we'll be following that up for you. And Yaya Jammeh's family members, that's exactly what the point is reporting as well, that they're given notice to present evidence before the Janet Commission. Whether they are going to come, we do not know, but let's just keep our fingers crossed. Like I said, bodies of 2 Gambians recovered in Italy. That's a story that we've been following all this week. We've been talking about that story as well. And The Voice has Hussein Mbenga. We had an interview with him yesterday. And The Voice had him saying, New Gambia is an illusion. That's what Mbenga said after he wrote this article. A lot of criticism came his way. And yesterday we asked him and he said everything that he said is based on facts. That's what he did say to the Fatou Network yesterday. And ex-NAWEC MD blames Jammeh for interfering with corporation affairs. We've seen that the current MD of NAWEC also did say that Mohamed Bazi was the one taking decisions. It was definitely not NAWEC. And everything that NAWEC was getting was executive directives. This and a lot more will come later. But today we have very special guests here in our studios. Of course, I have the EU ambassador to the Gambia, Attila, Lajos. Thank you very much for joining us. And of course, I have Mr. Nyang Jai, who is an economist. Nyang Jai is also a blogger and a social commentator. I had to drag him and say, you know, you really have to come today. Gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us. Mr. Ambassador, I'll let you greet our listeners first, then I come to Nyang.
Thank you very much. And first of all, thank you for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be here for the first time. I hope it's not the last one. I just want to say a big good afternoon to all your listeners. I hope this coming couple of minutes will be of interest for everybody.
Thank you. And Mr. Nyang Jai?
Good day everyone. I am Nyang Jai and I'm glad to be in your studios and talking about issues of national interest. So let the games begin.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Nyang Jai, and thank you very much, Mr. Ambassador. I will keep my phone on so we can look at the comments as they come in. But first, I would like to ask you about your impression of the meeting that was just concluded in Belgium. It actually has a huge news coverage around the world. Everyone was talking about it in Gambia. What were your impressions when I saw you when you got off the plane on Friday?
Well, I tell you frankly, I don't even remember the last time I was so happy in my life. To be very concrete, I think I should first of all say a big congratulations to the Gambian people, because this was not a meeting. This was a conference built up in different blocks, and this was all about the blueprint of the new Gambia, the National Development Plan, that is the coming future of the Gambia. And for me, it was not only exciting, it was really a pleasure to see how strongly, firmly committed the international community is. International community as a whole, all around the world, they were very eager to express support for the Gambia, for this new Gambia, the transition, the democratization of the Gambia, and of course the development of the Gambia. I think these 2 days also proved that since the presidential elections, 1st of December 2016, the path the Gambia has embarked on is a path where potentially we may eventually have a success story. And I think for the international community, there is nothing more important than having a new Gambia, rejoining the international community, engaging with the international community, and developing the country for the good of the people. So for me, these past 2 days in Brussels were amazing. I can go in details later on if you are interested.
Yes.
I know everybody's keen on the figures.
Yes.
But let me remind you, the aim of the conference was not only the mobilization of additional support. I am not playing modest. Indeed, 1.7 billion US dollars as a total of pledges is indeed a great deal. So I think the result, in this sense, the result of the conference went beyond any expectations.
Okay.
On the other hand, I do believe what is equally important is that the Gambia has managed to maintain a momentum of continued international support from all over the world. And it's important to underline that you had pledges from each corner of the world. Equally importantly, I would touch upon just two small issues, and that was, on one hand, the discussion, the thematic discussion of the different reforms the Gambia is engaged with on Tuesday afternoon after the pledging conference. And on Wednesday, we had a business forum where business met, and we were able to listen to young Gambian entrepreneurs who made an extremely positive impression on the conference. Actually, they just simply rocked the floor. And we had an upload for minutes before we could continue the forum. So all in all, absolutely great time, absolutely great momentum for Gambia. And not to mention that beside the conference, of course, the presidential delegation were received on the highest possible level by the different leaders in the European Union, both at the European Commission, the External Action Service, as well as in the European Parliament. So well done, Gambia, well done.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Ambassador. Now I will turn to Nyang Jai. There's been a lot of talk on social media when this meeting kicked off. A lot of people were saying, oh, when are we going to stop begging? And I think you wrote a piece on that. What is your impression, like when it started and all these comments were coming in?
Thank you, Fatu. I think the donor conference basically is just the culmination of work that has been going on for about 2-3 years, and 2 years to be precise, and it ended up in a document that was validated, and it had all stakeholder participation bottom up, meaning Gambians were consulted as per what they want in this strategic document. This strategic document is the country's roadmap, blueprint, and trajectory in the next coming years as per what needs to be done. The reason why the donors were highly engaged, you know, in development terms, we have what you call a fragile state. Gambia, coming out of 22 years of dictatorship, trying to transform, has a lot of hurdles. And these hurdles, if we are not fully supported by our development partners, we can get back to a situation that's worse than where we came out of, which was the 22 years of the brutal
because of
brute.
lack of money?
Not only lack of money, lack of direction, lack of money, lack of attention from our would-be partners. So basically, the world came together, the bilaterals, the multilaterals, all came together and said, you know what? We need to help Gambia, and it's a litmus test. The litmus test is, if Gambia fails, the world fails. So therefore, let's make Gambia a case that we can be proud of and a model, and we can show other countries, if you happen to get out of this, we can come to your aid so that you can join the League of Nations as a civilized, prosperous, you know, and a peaceful nation that is in peace with itself. So you have to be in peace with yourself before you're in peace with others. What has happened post the pledging? the euphoria in Gambia has gotten to a point where a lot of Gambians believe that the president and his entourage were coming home with bags of monies. And I've even heard some WhatsApp audios circulating around where people were talking about, we will get our mosque built, our communities rebuilt. Some even went ahead and divided the population of the Gambia and say per capita each Gambian can have so much in euros or dollars. That's to show you what they understand. But I think it's very important that the message gets across to the polity, we the people, that this package is mostly grants and grants in kind, not cash, because people need to understand that it's not cash. It's grants, aid, and some of these are in kind, meaning services, be it consultancies, whatever, but it will be monetized. So a country or an institution can say, we're going to give you X. And most of it will be socially oriented, meaning poverty reduction, institution building, capacity building for justice, transitionary justice. So these are things that the Gambians need to understand, that the crux of this NDP is all about transformation. And this transformation is about social inclusion, social justice, reparations. These are the things that is important to the new Gambia, because I'm talking about a country being at peace with itself. Being at peace with itself calls for equitable institutions that will look at each Gambian to be equal under the law, and we need these reforms to come in. So constitutional reform, legal reforms, political reforms are very key to the NDP, and I do hope that the average Gambians understand that that is what's happening, not monies in bags coming to the Gambia, because no one in the world has that kind of money. And by the way, the foundation of economics says there's nothing like a free lunch. So there's nothing like free bags of monies coming our way either.
Thank you very much, Nyanjai. I think someone said to me that when the president was coming, two of the cars that were in the convoy were all full of with euros. You know, someone said to me, I'm like, how can that be? Nobody would do it. Well, Mr. Ambassador, I've seen that the EU has been supporting the Gambia since day one. When the Barrow administration came in, they were worried that they could not even pay salary. And then EU came in a lot of other areas. But then again, we have some quotas saying EU is doing all of this because they want something in return, like they want to return our people back to the country. Are there any strings attached?
No.
To all these, things that EU is doing for Gambia?
Yes, I heard the critics and I heard the bitter voices. Let me just clarify, no, there are no strings attached to it. Indeed, it's true. Since the changes, the European Union stood firm by the then president and then the new government. And this is because they choose democracy. We felt obliged to be at support. Also, given the status of underdevelopment in the country in general terms, it is also a moral obligation for the European Union to assist countries. And don't forget, the ACP contract, the African, Caribbean and Pacific countries who has a development cooperation contract with the European Union, the Cotonou Agreement. This is a legal basis which has been there since 2000. So it's not like something we invented for the sake of the changes in the Gambia. What happened is indeed that during the Jammeh's regime, most of the time, much of the support was suspended, cancelled, withdrawn because of very serious human rights concerns. This is what has changed fundamentally. Just to give you an example, 2016 was already the first year of the so-called 11th EDF, which is the European Development Fund, which works in 5-year cycles. And there was a risk of losing all the funds which were so-called earmarked for the Gambia, for the development in the Gambia. Lucky enough, with the changes, we could save all the earmarked amounts. So what happened is that when the new government came to power, when even before President Barrow took oath in the stadium here last year, February, we had the European Union Commissioner for Development and International Cooperation, Commissioner Mimica, coming here and promptly made pledges to support the Gambian changes. And that was a specific year in the sense that we, although we didn't know what is really the heritage of the dictatorship, but we suspected that there would be some issues to be tackled by the new government, some challenges. And everybody knows that that Jamie emptied the Casa.
Yes.
So in fact, last year, as part of the support announced, which was a package of 75 plus 150 million euro in total, again, not in cash, but in development support. However, because of the circumstances in the country, we also felt important that some component of this newly announced support will have to come like in cash from the treasury to the treasury to stabilize the country. I think last year the country was close to bankruptcy. And I think what the government has done on macroeconomic terms is certainly commendable under the conditions. But I would leave the professional evaluation for my friend, because I am not an expert in economics. What I do know is that the disbursement of the first budgetary support, which was eventually operationalized last year in August, 25 plus 5 million euro, that certainly assisted, among other measures, that certainly assisted the stabilization of the country. Now, when you asked what are the conditions of such support, it's important to underline that, of course, we have a contract with the government as to what we do, what are the rights and obligations of the two parties. So, for example, in this budgetary support, which is something new in the Gambia, because Gambia never ever received budgetary support from the European Union in the past. And we are talking about, what, 40 years, more than 40 years of collaboration between the Gambia and the EU. This was the first time, and the contract did include benchmarks, objectives the government was supposed to achieve. But like last year, they were very basic. Respect for human rights, the release of all political prisoners, something which supports the democratization of the country, which was also achievable. And I think it's something which needs to be underlined, that whatever benchmark we associate with such a state-building contract, it got to be negotiated with the partner, of course, with the government, and it got to be achievable, because the overall intention was to release these budgetary supports. Now, I fully agree with my colleague here, because aid will not help you all the way and shall not be the way of operating. But under circumstances and given the state of development in this country, we agreed with the government that we will have a series of budgetary supports from the EU coming into the country, again based on a state and resilience building contract with certain objectives. But this is also something like not giving money to achieve something. So it's not a pushing factor, it's going to be a pulling factor. The government achieves certain benchmarks, certain objectives, then disbursement of the budgetary support can be made. This will not go forever. We already see an exit to this budgetary support, but I think for the time being, and given the financial and economic situation of the country, it's important.
Okay, so Daddy did mention, Young Jai did mention that there is no free lunch, but the ambassador is saying here that there are definitely no strings attached. What they're going by is the democracy that's happening. The prisoners were released and Gambians are now free, and it's all because of the democratic climate that is in the country that also contributed, and the fact that Gambia was almost bankrupt.
See, all countries, developing countries, have a program with the IMF and the World Bank. Unfortunately for Gambia, we're still under what you call an SMP, a staff monitored program. This staff monitored program has what you call triggers and prior actions. Triggers are what needs to happen for you to access something. A prior action is a condition precedent, meaning you need to do this to have that. And all other members, Paris Club, London Club, they go with what the IMF has as a program for the country in terms of conditionalities. So there are conditions, and there is nothing that's a carte blanche. So if
You're still saying there are conditions?
Of course, the conditions are more fiscal and monetary in nature, meaning you need to have a BOP, a balance of payment of this range. Your fiscal operation, you should not have deficit financing of more than 10% of your previous year's budget. And it's good for the Gambia, because what it does is trying to tame our financial expenditures and tame our fiscal burden. Gambia is fiscally burdened, because if you look at our total expendables, it's more than our total receivables. Hence the budget gap we have, hence the financing. And he is right. This is one of the forced support we have from the EU. In the past, we used to have what you call a STABEX, stabilization. But in terms of budget support, this is the first time it's coming, and I do hope and I do envisage that we will have few more budget support in the coming years. But my issue, Fatu, is very simple, and the EU will not help Gambia to be a prosperous nation.
They will not.
They will not, and they cannot. No, we have to be realistic. No country has begged its way to prosperity. No country has built a nation out of handouts. What they do for us, let me just finish, please.
Because like the ambassador
but
said, remember
I just want to learn.
Okay.
I just want to learn.
Okay. Yeah.
What they're doing for us is to give us respite, breathing space, time to build institutions, strengthen our institution. Then we need to look inward for salvation, meaning Gambia's development trajectory will be owned by Gambians, driven by Gambians, promoted by Gambians, sourced and financed by Gambians. If we understand that, we can build a nation. Everything the EU has been doing, the World Bank has been doing, is to make sure that we keep afloat. But keeping afloat is not taking us to the promised land. What's going to take Gambians to the promised land is to own up in terms of where we want to take this country. Yeah. Right now, as a nation, one thing that we need to inculcate in the minds of Gambians, that the Indias of the world, the Chinas of the world, the Indonesias of the world, the Malaysias of the world had what you call an organic homegrown in terms of resource mobilization, funding and infrastructure, and private sector development.
Okay, Nyangbo, what we're saying, I understand your point right here, but also remember where Gambia came from. You know, the situation that we were in at that time, there was not much that we can do.
Totally
we definitely needed help from Big Brother, and they stepped in. Yeah. Because if that was not done, at least to get us somewhere, with the funds that are coming in, at least some projects are able to take place. And some of these projects, at some point, the people who are there would be able to stand on their own because they would be able to generate some income from where they started. So I think it's kind of like to get us started, right?
That's what we want, but we don't want it to be a revolving door.
I don't think it's going to be...
No, see, aid is a moral hazard.
Yeah, now he's telling you frankly, listen.
I tell you frankly, I hope the European Union, by assisting the Gambian partners, will be doing a little bit more than just letting them or keeping them floating. Because what we talk about here is now a transformation of the country, including a transformation of the society, in the sense that what was not welcomed in the past, to have initiative, creativity, initiation by Gambian people and population. This is what we should have. I always introduce myself like I look like a tubab, but I'm listening. And I would also add that I am that type of tubab listening who is encouraging my partners, be it in the government or civil society or in between, encouraging the partners to take more ownership and more leadership for their life, for their development, for their faith. The European Union is interested in a strong, sovereign Gambia. As long as the Gambian people decides to be in their own country, the Gambia, we are interested in that. We are interested in having a strong partner, standing on democratic grounds. This was the biggest deficit in the past 22 years. If we look at some of the projects, my friend is right. The development assistance itself will not bring you to paradise. It never did. But on the other hand, we are now having perhaps a chance in history that we have a chance to perhaps eventually, and when I say we, I already consider myself like half Gambian. What I mean is the Gambian people, the Gambia herself. There is a chance to envisage the Gambia to become the Singapore of Western Africa. Won't we have potentials here for that? I'm not saying it's going to happen anytime soon, don't get me wrong. It's not a matter of 3 years in office or 5 years in office. It's a much longer duration of continuous, consistent efforts. But the chance is there now. And when I think of this business forum I mentioned at the beginning, when I think of those young Gambian entrepreneurs who were there, I mean, this is the Gambia. This is the force of the Gambia which may eventually convert the Gambia into let's say, Dubai of Western Africa. Because I do believe the potential is there. The Gambia is a small market. Everybody knows that. Less than 2 million people. But don't forget, it's strategically well located. And that could be an entry point to the ECOWAS big market. And now we are talking about 500 million people, which makes a completely big difference. And I do believe the young generation, the youthful nation, like the Gambian nation, is very youthful. That's the greatest potential the Gambia has got. And I am personally very positive that the young generation of this country will really make a big time.
Well, thank you very much, Nyang. A lot of people are commenting on here saying what you're talking about, it's in the long term, and they said that's a good thing to also put that in as well. So now let's talk about the pledges. When it came, a lot of people are like, you know what happened to Haiti? They had pledges and it never came. And then others are also asking if it's all grant or some portions are going to be concessionary loans and all of that. We want Mr. Ambassador to please clarify that for us.
With pleasure. Like in any donor conference, and I hate the word donor conference because it was much more than just financial pledges. But let's stick to the financial pledges part. Like in any other conference like this, you have a combination of both pledges of grants and pledges of loans. Some of the speakers, when they took the floor and did make their statement and express their pledges, some of them didn't even specify at the conference in that moment, because don't forget, this is a very high-level conference. Speakers had the floor for 2 minutes only.
Wow.
So it's not like lengthy speeches by which time some may fall asleep. No, it was tuck, 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 very much a sharpened exercise. Now, some of the pledges made were not clarified whether they were grants or loans. So we have a combination, more or less 50-50, I would say.
That's the 1.4 billion?
That's the one. Well, if you speak in euro, yes, it's 1.45 billion euro. If you speak in US dollars, it's 1.7 billion US dollars.
So it was not clear if some are loans or grants?
Some are loans and some are grants.
Okay.
Now, I can make it very clear and loud that all the pledges made by the European Union as an institution, as well as European Union member states, they were grants. So the EU itself pledged 140 million additional financial support for the Gambia, and this is grant.
Yes.
Make no mistake about it. On the other hand, I think the difficult part comes now, because it's now up for the government, with the assistance of some donors, to make sure that there is a mechanism put in place to ensure that the pledges are going to be operationalized and channeled into the country in whatever form the pledges were made. And I think this is also a common interest, because the government knows who pledged how much.
Yes.
And it's only the government that knows that. And the government has got every right to go after you and he and others, saying that you pledged this, so we would like you now to come and fulfill your pledges. I think that's also a challenging part. You mentioned the Haiti conference. Yes, things like that happens, but I think what is also important that it is not only now sitting back and just waiting for the donors to come and fulfill their pledges. I think it is also up to the country, to the government, to the civil society, to make progress in the country to the extent possible in the different aspects.
I don't mean to cut you right here, but I just want to ask a question, because somebody said, for instance, if the government's human rights records is going down, like there are some arrests and people are being intimidated and stuff like that, that could affect the pledge. Is that true?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And look at what happened during the Jammeh's time. I mean, in the 11th EDF, not a single penny was channeled into the country via non-state actors because of the human rights concerns we had. Now, the EU pledged 140 million.
Yes.
Trust me, as long as the government, the Gambia, remains on track regarding democracy, respect for human rights, rule of law, the basic fundamental issues, then the pledges will be delivered. Should the country make a U-turn, which I don't think it will, but should the country make a U-turn, that would be a totally different kettle of fish.
Wow.
Because if basic principles, basic values the European Union really stands for are not respected in the country, then we will have to look at how we can use leverage to make sure that those rights are respected. I think the Gambian people suffered far too long
23 years.
to do it any other time in the future.
Definitely.
And I also somehow sense from the population and the contacts I have throughout the country that this is like an opportunity for the country to be reborn.
Yes.
Symbolically speaking. And I think it's a great opportunity. We got to make sure that we render all the necessary support for making it like a success story.
Okay. Well, Nyanjai, you heard what the ambassador said, that yes, it's a pledge and the government would follow up on that, but also the government of the Gambia has a responsibility. That is to make sure that democracy is maintained in the Gambia and also, be following up on the loans. And I think we did talk about that when you got here, that it could change and it is very important for them to be following up on these loans and pledges.
See, what happened after any donor conference, you need what you call aid coordination. Aid coordination is to go after these pledges. And I will safely tell you that the outcome of this NDP will depend on how rigorous and aggressive Gambia is to go and follow up on these pledges. Because, see, the first step is a pledge, and the next thing is operationalizing a pledge to make it a firm commitment. Mm-hmm. And after you have the firm commitment, it will look into the program or the area of intervention, and you start having disbursements. But then with disbursements again, there are certain triggers. Political environment is very important.
Yes.
So it's a very lucid and fragile situation based on the governance, architecture, and infrastructure of the country as we move along going forward. But from what we are seeing, all indicators are 90% of the pledges will be realized, and it will come to the Gambia because, like the economists will want to say, ceteris paribus, all things being equal, looking at the environment today, it is conducive. And I will safely say that this is a dawn of a new day for the Gambia. And now, what is next is what Gambia wants to make out of it. We have been given a golden opportunity to rebuild a nation, kickstart a new development trajectory that subsequent generation of Gambians will have an opportunity to have an independent livelihood. And that is, we will enhance the health infrastructure, the educational infrastructure, social inclusion. And if these three things are done, you have given an individual an opportunity. If someone has an opportunity, they can run with it all the way to the bank. As far as I'm concerned, that is the most an individual should be given of. My take is, Fatu, I never look at 5-year plans. I have a vision, and a country must also have a vision. Gambia today must think, where do we want to be 25, 50 years from now? The first thing we should say as a country, we want to phase out donor support. Not stop, but phase out. Meaning in the next 15 years, we want 0% of budget support into our budget. What that does, it gives us dignity as a people.
Well, yeah, the president of Ghana has been campaigning.
What that does, it gives us financial independence. The only reason Rwanda as a country can look at donors and tell them, I don't want this, is because they can do it for themselves. Mm-hmm. So that is what countries need, and that is part of being independent. Mm. Independent is for you to manifest your destiny. Mm-hmm. And in manifesting your destiny, you should be able to have something. And the Wolofs will say, Munsa Bopa, Gomsa Bopa, Momsa Bopa equals independence. And this is what the mindset of the Gambian should be 15, 25 years coming. If not, we will live in the vicious circle and cycle of receiving handouts. And we are dignified people, and we should transition out of having handouts. And 15 years is reasonable for a country to turn around from handouts.
Mm-hmm. If I may just reflect on this, I may not connect it to years, but I would, and basically I fully agree and share your views, because I believe if it is connected to the progress in the economy, to development of the pace of the development of the country, indeed there should be a strategy of exiting aid. On the other hand, what we talk about here is perhaps now, in this given moment in time, the new government, the new Gambia, having this very strong support from international community, perhaps we are having the right moment for a new national consensus, which is a part of the reconciliation and truth and reconciliation process which is already on, which is a part of a new start. Because this, although the National Development Plan is for the next 3 years to come, but when it comes to developing the country, rightly so, we are talking about much longer term vision and much longer term programs. I do believe, as far as I see it now, there is no force in the Gambia. When I say force, I mean political movements or category of the society which would not want to have a progressive and successful development of the Gambia. So I think perhaps with this successful conference, perhaps there could be a consideration given to establishing a new political consensus in the country to make sure that all parties are pro about building this new Gambia with the given chance now. Okay. I very much look forward to Gambian partners saying what they need and what they don't need.
Mm-hmm. And it seems you want to say something.
I want to interject a bit, Fatu, on the Youth Enterprise Empowerment Project. I would love for the government of the Gambia and the EU to have a midterm review. The midterm review is to change dynamics. You see, there is one thing receiving aid, and there is another thing, the cost of managing aid. So Gambia receiving, let's say, give an example, 1 million euros from the EU, and 360,000 euros is spent on managing this aid. It's not filtering to the people that need help. That's one thing. And I think my biggest concern as a Gambian is I appreciate any penny coming my way to make Gambia better. But if you look at the faces managing these projects, they don't understand as much as we, the indigenous, know what we need. So help us have strong monitoring and evaluation, but let it be, it's still country-driven. But honestly, I'm not in line with the way projects are managed. Flying in consultants all the time. They cannot tell us what's wrong in Gambia. The Gambians know what's wrong in Gambia. Get people on the ground to fix. It's a Gambian problem, a homegrown problem, will be resolved by Gambians. We don't want a one-size-fits-all where a consultant is flown somewhere to come diagnose a problem theoretically.
Okay. Well, that's very clear.
It's a point.
Yes,
Sorry,
yes,
it's a point because indeed a Gambian solution to a Gambian problem is the way of future. On the other hand, again, we are talking about the legacy of dictator Jammeh. During the past many years, before he left the country, there was no, even those limited amount of support which was channeled into the country because of humanitarian reasons, they were not channeled through government capacities. They were channeled through non-state actors. And that was because we didn't trust the government and the regime. Now, this is where we started from. The new government will have to build up the capacities which would enable them to make sure that the assistance, the development assistance, can be channeled through government services. I think we are not yet there, but I know for a fact that also the government is working on that very hard. I also believe that that's the demand for the future. To make sure that we find a way, a formula in which most of the assistance will eventually reach the beneficiary. On the other hand, we also got to be realistic. If we are talking about a brand new technology to be domesticated in the Gambia, you may not have the expertise in country. So dreaming that we will have in every project only consultants hired from homeland, that may not be realistic. But I believe the intention should be in that direction. Let me also underline something here, which I am still or yet to see, but I have high expectations. We are talking about a world where almost in every corner you can find a Gambian abroad successful. How to bring this power of expertise into the country in the sense of taking the advantage of their successes and making sure their successes can be repeated on Gambian soil. They do not necessarily have to return home if they have established their family, their existence in a third country, but how to benefit from their knowledge and success. I think how to utilize diaspora expertise, that's also a question for us in the development cooperation, but I think also for the country in general.
Okay, Nyanja did mention the issue about monitoring the funds, and that would take me to, I guess, the last question, because I've been keeping you all here for a long time now. How would EU be monitoring how the funds are spent? Because recently there's been a lot of talk on social media about corruption, even though there is no evidence. I've said it. People are talking about the government, some corruption coming in, but they couldn't show any evidence. Will EU be monitoring how these funds are spent?
Well, by the rules, every EU penny spent in any country is monitored how it is spent. So for the EU pledges, of course, there are built-in mechanisms to control that the development assistance reaches its objective. Every project, not only the big programs, but single projects, they also have inbuilt formulas how to make midterm review, how to have an evaluation, an objective outsourced evaluation after the project is completed. So for us it's extremely important. But Fatou, you asked the question of overall pledges. Now, the European Union cannot monitor all the pledges the international community made. If we were monitoring that, we would be like babysitting for the Gambia, which is not the case and which is not the intention of the European Union. So what we would like to do to assist the government and the civil society, because it is not only a governmental role. The civil society plays an important role in overall transparency, to make sure that they develop a system whereby they can monitor. Now, when you mention corruption, this is an issue everywhere, especially where we are talking about a country restarting. That's why for us it's extremely important, and I know the government is working on it, to establish an anti-corruption commission.
Yes, the Justice Minister.
I have no doubt. Minister Tambadou said.
Yes.
Exactly. He also promised me that by the end of this year they will have the legislation in place for that. I think it's already a huge step. I mean, just remember what happened in the past 23 years. The past 23 years, there was a leader of this country who just continuously, like milking the cow,
all by himself. Yeah.
Exactly. So I think this is something to which the Gambians said no more, not again. So by helping the government, the country, to establish such checks and balances, I think it's critically important in the future.
Okay, and Nyanja, on the monitoring part, he said the EU cannot babysit, because if they want to monitor all this project, that means all their time would be, monitoring the Gambian situation, and that would take a long time, I guess.
Well, that's not even the issue. I mean, they mean well the moment they decide to help and intervene. What we do with the assistance, to be honest, I think it's more of our responsibility morally as a nation, because these are international taxpayer funds. We need to understand that. And what it means, it's an opportunity cost. Europe has foregone something to help Gambia. They could have built better trains, better railroads, help more people within Europe or other places. You have to understand one thing. Resources are scarce, the richest country to the poorest. In the world, we have a shortage of resources. So when they give you, they have foregone another opportunity. So for the Gambia, I will say one thing. We have an opportunity to create a launch pad. The launch pad is to build a prosperous nation going forward, looking 15, 20 years down the line. What we make of it and where we want to go with it, it's our responsibility as an independent nation. Therefore, the government of the Gambia, the people of the Gambia must be steadfast in making sure that institutional reform, legal reform, political reform, social inclusion are things that we will work on in the next 4 to 5 years, hoping that if we master these things and have great reforms, we will have access to opportunities. When we have access to opportunities, upward mobility, which is progress and prosperity, will be ushered into the doorsteps of the Gambian. And that's the only thing a citizen must ask from its country. Give us access to opportunities. And this access comes with education, health, infrastructure, equitable, justified society based on good laws and regulations. And thank you so much.
And thank you very much, Nyanja. Of course, I'll take one question from the comments that are coming in. And there's one that says, if these pledges are attached to deportation of Gambians, that would always come.
No, the pledges are not attached to deportation of Gambians. Deportation wasn't an issue at the conference, by the way. I know since the beginning we have this issue. And this is also because in the past 12 months or so, we had quite a high number of Gambians who were stranded mainly in Libya, who decided that they wish to come home. Indeed, the EU assisted the return of these voluntary returns mainly from Libya, with the very capable assistance of the International Organization for Migration, the IOM. I think it's also an issue and a responsibility in the sense that we are also doing quite a number of efforts, the YEP project or the IOM project, and there will be much more coming up in terms of creating an environment where these returnees, voluntary returns, can be reintegrated to the society successfully. I hate to say, but I know there is a very strange perception of these returnees. I'm very sad to hear that some of the communities, they consider them losers. And I myself, I consider them winners in the sense that at least they survived this dangerous journey. So it is now our moral obligation to make sure that they reintegrate to the society, and that's where we put a lot of efforts in to skills development, to assist them to achieve self-employment so they can start something in the Gambia. It was very interesting at the business forum, one of the young Gambian entrepreneurs, they formulated like a slogan, which I think I will have a discussion with them to use and discuss the copyright issues, in the sense that he said, perhaps now it's time to start it, to try it from home. And I think it's symbolically very true.
Yeah.
We got to make an environment, a conducive environment for business to start with and help these young people to really find their way within the Gambia.
They call Made in the Gambia success stories.
Thank you. And just to say that I have the former CDS here, and he waited for a bit. I think he left. But before we go, Mr. Ambassador, if you can just give us a rundown of AU's projects in the Gambia right now.
Wow. We have a challenge because when this promise of a total of 225 million was made a year ago, also we pledged that by the end of mid-2018, which is now end of June, we will be able to commit and contract all these projects. This is what we have been working on. We have interventions, some of them already ongoing, some of them in the pipeline to get started, in many different sectors, from good governance, security sector reform, to agriculture, from civil society support to SSR reform or transitional justice assistance. So it's quite a wide scope. What I would suggest, perhaps we will provide you with a more comprehensive visual even, what you can also broadcast through your network,
yes,
to highlight what are the projects ongoing, because what we are talking about here is like in the next 3 years, we will have all these projects out of this 225 million rolling out. Now, on the top of this, we will still have to put into contracts, into operation, the projects sponsored from the additional pledges we are making. Because these pledges, additional pledges, will make a total of 365 million euro overall development support, what the European Union is delivering to Gambia. And we got to make sure that all these are operationalized in the next 3 years. So it's going to be quite a big ride. But I'm very excited, and all my colleagues in the EU delegation in Banjul are very excited about doing something good and contributing to the development of this wonderful country.
Nyanjai, a final word from you?
My final word is I just want to implore on Gambians to understand one thing. Nation building is a collective effort. The effort from the polity, the people, the political class, and the technical class that constitute what we call a government. Therefore, we, the people, must always be on the edge and expect a whole lot from the people we have vested power to. But equally, we, the people, need to play our part in nation building, and that is doing our bit. Doing our bit starts with not being liabilities to society, but contributors towards building a nation. What have you done for your country lately? I think that's the question that begs an answer from a lot of people who are watching and eagerly and anxiously being on keyboards saying the government's not doing this, the people need this, but what are you doing to give that to your country? Country deserves a lot from its people, and it's the people who make up the country. So if we do our bit, Gambia will rise. Good day.
Amen.
Well, thank you very much, Nyang, and thank you very much, Mr. Ambassador. Very, very good, big program today. A lot of questions coming in and also comments coming in from Gambians all over in the diaspora and also in Banjul. But I would like to thank you all for coming, and please come back again next time.
My pleasure.
I would like to go through your program so that we can, have another chat about it. It's very important for people to know. And Nyang Jai, thank you. I'll be dragging you again because a lot of good comments coming in here. Daddy really knows his stuff. Thank you all very much, and do join us again on Monday. Thank you, Mr. Ambassador, and thank you very much, Nyang. We'll be back again with the news analysis on Monday. Thank you for joining us once again. I am Fatou Kamara, and have a very good evening. Bye-bye.